The records were housed in a purpose-built stone chest with a hinged wooden lid, which was set into the enclave to the side of the chimney breast of my grandparents' sitting room, a room that was commandeered and used solely by my uncle, Ivan, their youngest child and the only one still living at home. It blended in perfectly with the surroundings as if it were just a continuation of the wall, was around the size of a bench seat and doubled up as such as and when required. It is impossible at this stage for me to say how old I was when I began to ease open the lid and peek at the treasures that lay within, but I must have been very young, as this is one of my earliest memories. Therein lay the entire works to date of Led Zeppelin, Yes, Black Sabbath, Horselips, AC/DC, and Mike Oldfield, to name but a very few, as well as one-offs by certain bands and 3 or 4 albums of others. I knew all of them. It had come to be an obsession. As a very young child, I marvelled at the artwork, turning it this way and that, taking in the pictures featured on the double-sleeved albums, fascinated by the more gimmicky ones, like Led Zeppelin 3 with its turning wheel, which could be rotated to change which photographs you could see. Curious of the one that featured only symbols, which I thought was some obscure language or secret code I was yet too young to decipher. I remember being particularly captivated with Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell and the single of Ian Gillan's No Laughing in Heaven, which I thought looked quite sinister, and I wondered if they sounded the same. I shelved those ones for a couple of years before I braved it to find out. My favourite albums of all were the ones featuring the jester in different scenarios, telling a story through their artwork, which was nothing short of phenomenal. They enchanted me. It was one of these that I played first. I was 6 years old, and I assured myself that I had paid close enough attention to be able to operate the top of the range JVC turntable and separate amp, which was set into another purpose-built recess on the other side of the chimney breast. I had heard it all before, of course, but that album, Misplaced Childhood, was and still is my favourite of the Marillion releases. After that, I played all of them very, very carefully. I handled the records and the covers as delicately as possible, and thereafter, when I was at home, I played my parents' records as well. They were also huge music fans and had a decently sized collection of similar genres, but by no means as impressive as my uncle's, which all things considered must have cost him an absolute fortune and taken up a good lot of his wages every week for years. I was with my uncle, who was my mum's younger brother, all the time, like a sticking plaster, and he took me everywhere with him. Ivan was a real character, a joker, a keen photographer. He was full of energy and always had to be doing something. He absolutely loved life. I recall him regularly having parties in the sitting room where I sat amongst his friends, listening to music, looking at the pictures on the cover of whatever album happened to be playing at the time. I must have been 2 or 3 years of age in this instance, but the notion must have taken hold of me even in my very formative years. Maybe it was in the genes, or maybe I was just a product of my environment, but there began my own obsession with music, which endures to this day and always, spans various genres and is ever increasing and evolving. Despite his love of life and appearing outwardly to be fit and healthy, tragically his life was cut short when he died suddenly of a massive heart attack at just 35, when I was 15. The shock and loss was indescribable. Not long after, his entire record collection passed into my hands. It could never in any way ease the pain of losing Ivan, but I was exceptionally grateful to have them in my possession, and it was unquestioned by everyone that I would love and care for the records just as much as he had. It was 1994, a few years into the advent of CDs, which didn't take up as much space, didn't need to be turned over, could be forwarded on and didn't skip. All in all, albums were out. And in that era, for me, something spectacular and magical was lost. Like everyone else, I bought into the CD phase for a while, but I missed the ceremony of playing a record, that crackling sound which preceded the music, knowing which order the songs were going to be played in without the addition of remastered bonus tracks, and undoubtedly the intricacies of the artwork on the album covers. As the name suggests, CDs were just too compact for me, and so I reverted to the records time and again. When I separated from my ex-husband, I left the record collection in the house we had shared, where he promised he would store them safely, along with some other belongings, until I was more permanently settled. But when our divorce turned acrimonious and we eventually broke all contact, I feared the worst. As he had absolutely no interest in music, I reasoned that he had probably sold or scrapped them to make room for other things. Over the years, I tried many times to put the loss of the music from my mind, but it frequently haunted the periphery of my thoughts and left me bereft, just as the loss of Ivan always had. Just over 2 years ago, my ex made contact with me and we put our past differences behind us. The very first thing I asked him was if he still had my records. He assured me that he did and that they were safely stored in the attic of the house I once owned, which was still owned by him but was let out. He promised that when the tenants quit the property, he would retrieve them for me, and this put my mind greatly at ease for a while. Unfortunately, for several different reasons beyond his control, this did not come to pass. The house where they nestled for years after my departure has now been sold on, and the record collection has now been irretrievably lost to me. While I mourned its loss previously, the finality of knowing it is gone forever is an immeasurable hurt. Of course, I will always treasure my memories, and unlike people, most things can be replaced. And I know the records could be if I so wished, but I can't bring myself to do it. They would feel like forgeries to me. Just like the album, my own childhood feels somewhat misplaced, but as with everything in life, there are lessons to be learned. The most important for me being that the loss of some people and some things can never truly be recovered from, especially as in my case, if you relate the loss of the thing to the loss of the person. The scars may scab over, but they never really heal. And of course, I've learned you should always take very good care of the things that you love.